Hello everyone, my name is Alex Penn, and today I'm going to be doing a presentation over youth sports psychology. I'm going to first start off by asking, what is sports psychology? Well, according to American Psychological Association, sports psychology is defined as a proficiency that uses psychological knowledge and skills to address optimal performance and well-being of athletes, developmental and social aspects of sports participation, and systematic issues associated with sports settings and organizations. We are all aware that to accomplish a goal or to play in a game, there is definitely a mental component that plays a big part. Some athletes even have mental block or a mental breakdown when it comes to preparation for a big game or a big event. Sports psychology is an avenue that can really help these athletes, especially the youth, to understand and overcome these mental hurdles or their mental challenges that they might have. Doing sports psychology with gifted and talented youth athletes. According to Evans and Slater, the importance of teaching the youth about sports psychology is very beneficial. Now let's think about this. Sports psychology in adults is already hard enough. Think about if you had to sit there and train your mind so you can allow yourself your peak performance from a mental standpoint in any physical activity. Now let's think about that in children. Sometimes it's even hard to have a normal conversation with them, let alone a conversation about their feelings towards a sport. With that being said, the young athletes are very influential. So when sports psychology is presented to them, it is very important. When young athletes are taught educational ways through sports psychology to navigate through their mind during sports, they are able to understand the way they feel and control more of their emotions. So when they get to that big game or that big event, they can sit there, file through their emotions in their head, and understand why they feel that way and use the tools that a sports psychologist has given them to get over those mental hurdles. If the sports psychologist can find a way to reach these young athletes at a level that makes sense to them and communicate to them in a way that they will understand, then, as said before, sports psychology will be very effective for them. Children in youth sports are also molded greatly by their peers on the team or in the sport they play. Think about if you go to try out for a team, you want to be the best one because you don't want to be made fun of by your peers or your friends. This is one of the obstacles that youth athletes often face, and also one of the obstacles that a sports psychologist can help that youth athlete file through and overcome. Sports psychology and the adolescent athlete. One of the heightened points in youth sports psychology is that young children go through a lot of changes mentally and physically at this point in their life. Their body is also producing hormones that they don't have under control yet, and that they may confuse them a little bit. Let's just remember back to when you were maybe going through puberty, and even before that, all the emotions raging through your body and thoughts that you didn't just quite understand. As well as these factors, youth athletes may desire independence as well as approval from adults, whether that be their coach or their parents. Although these desires contradict each other, they are prominent in youth athletes. Having these said desires may leave the adolescent athlete a bit confused. Furthermore, a strategy that sports psychologists have implemented is showing the individual by a Venn diagram that they are their own person, but they are also correlated and connected to their parents and their coach. This strategy allows them to see that they can be separate from their parents and their coach, but as well as being connected to their parents and coach. Oftentimes, this allows the young athlete to see that they can make themselves proud and have their own goals as well as to make other people proud of them. On top of that, young athletes often have a hard time balancing their lives. They have social life, an academic life, and a sports life. And some of them may even have other extracurricular activities, like a club or arts, or be participating in the church choir. So they have to spread themselves between school, their friends, their sport, and their other hobbies. This isn't an easy task for anyone, and an even harder task for a young child. Not being able to hang out with their friends on a Saturday or failing a test because of practice will leave them feeling shameful and guilty about themselves. There are many ways and strategies that a sports psychologist can go about advising and evaluating these athletes. This is why sports psychology for youth athletes is so important. They are going through so many changes emotionally and physically that a sports psychologist can really help them along their way with, and help them navigate through this hard time in their life. A collaborative sports psychology program for parents in youth sport. There has been research done saying that parent behaviors and attitudes have an important impact on children's experiences in sports. Vincent and Christensen also noted that sports psychology practitioners identified interactions between parents and children as critical for understanding youth athlete behaviors, thoughts, and feelings in the sport context. Think about the situation. You're playing soccer and you score a goal. And what do? You turn to look at your parents on the sideline and they're so happy. They're jumping up and down, they're screaming, "Way to go, that's my kid." So let's think about that on the flip side. What happens when you miss a goal or you lose the ball and you turn back to look at them again? They might even be cursing, have a frown, or they might even yell at you in the car on the ride home. Those are two experiences that can have a lasting effect on a kid. And like we stated earlier, kids seek approval from their elders, especially their parents. Whether you realize it or not, parents influence their children's sporting experiences greatly. Although it is good to teach children about sports psychology, it is almost as important to teach the parent how to act towards that child during the successful and the unsuccessful moments in their sporting careers. Developing programs and workshops to teach parents how to interact with their child at a youth sporting event is one of the ways that we can help these parents. Vincent and Christensen found that workshops and programming that cater specifically to parents can have a positive impact on the experience of coaches, parents, and youth athletes alike. This is one of the ways to teach the parents not how to parent, but more how to interact with their child to make sports and events better for that child. A positive reinforcement from the parents oftentimes results in a greater mental state for that child in regards to sports. Furthermore, sports psychologists desire to work alongside parents in aiding and helping them with the sports psychology aspect of youth sports. The efforts of sports psychology professionals to assist sport administrators in evaluating youth sport programs. It is very important that youth sport coaches and administrators that put on youth sport programs are dialed into the specific environment and the specific psychological needs of these youth athletes. Therefore, Iwaski and Fry conducted a study that investigated the relationship between athletes' perception of the climate, whether that be caring, task, or ego involving, to their intrinsic motivation, desire to continue participating in the future, and their caring behaviors towards their peers or coaches. Sports psychologists generally believe that they can aid coaches and sport administrators in helping youth athletic programs. The environment that a young athlete is in can change their whole perspective on the sport alone. Therefore, when sports psychologists worked alongside the coaches and help aid the coaches, it creates a better environment for the young athletes. When you give young athletes a task to complete, they are more times than not focused on getting the task done, which is a positive environment. They're setting a goal that you're telling them and they're completing it. Therefore, if the sporting environment is centered around individual ego building, it conditions the children to think about themselves and not consider the team when they're playing a sport. Waskey and Fry found that when athletes perceived a high caring and task-involving climate, along with less emphasis on an ego-involving climate, they are more likely to report higher intrinsic motivation, engage in caring behaviors towards their coaches and teammates, and desire to continue their participation in the sport. The authors of this article found that their findings were theoretically consistent, as it follows that if youth feel they are in a safe and inviting environment that emphasizes their personal effort and improvement, they will be more engaged and more likely to have fun. This goes to show you that if you provide youth athletes with the right environment and make them comfortable, they are more likely to give you their best efforts, and they'll be more excited to play the sport. They'll want to come back year after year and participate and continue a healthy lifestyle in their youth. The practice of youth sports psychology, a youth coach's perspective. Coaches are often one of the biggest influences on youth athletes. If a coach recommends something to a young athlete, they are likely to listen to them. If a coach tells you, hey, to be able to score that touchdown, you need to throw a longer pass. Well, you can bet that that quarterback is going to work on his passes and getting them further down the field. Likewise, if a coach tells the same quarterback, hey, you should see a sports psychologist to help you get over that nervous block when it comes to game day, you can bet that that quarterback is going to seek out or be more receptive to the ideas of a sports psychologist. But if that coach tells his athlete, don't ever go see a sports psychologist, they are useless, then that young athlete will probably grow to think that about a sports psychologist. This is all because youth athletes are at an adolescent age where other people's opinions influence them and even mold their own personal opinions. A coach often decides whether to engage in sports psychology, to employ a consultant, or to terminate any relationship with a sports psychologist. So, with that being said, the coach is the one who usually makes the veto vote about if their athlete should see a sports psychologist or not. So these coaches hold a great influence on whether these athletes will get to be with the sports psychologist or not. So it is important for them to have a good outlook on the idea of sports psychology. Youth coaches often do have a general positive outlook on sports psychologists, and they do tend to believe that if a sports psychologist works with a youth athlete, it will result in a better performance by said athlete. Coaches expressed if young performers were exposed to sports psychology at an early age in development, that prevalent weaknesses or areas for improvement could be identified and strategies could be put in place to help these athletes develop the abilities further. It is very important that youth coaches have a good and welcoming perspective on sports psychology and a sports psychologist, because they are oftentimes the channel or the branch that links these young athletes to these sports psychologists. Peer relationships and physical activity context. A road less traveled in youth sport and exercise psychology research. Let's just be honest. Young athletes are often very concerned with what others think about them. The opinions of their peers hold heavy weight with them. This is especially true in sports. Everyone wants to be the best on the team so their peers won't make fun of them. No one wants to be picked last because that would mean that they would stink. Smith noted that a youngster's experience with peers in the physical activity setting can be explored at several levels of social complexity, ranging from individual social orientation and perceptions through interactions, relationships, and growth level processes. Children will join sports just to make friends. This goes to show that their perception of joining a team is to make friends and be accepted by these people on the team. This is why having a positive environment in this youth sports setting is so important. If these children join a team and recognize that there is a teammate aspect to the environment, and then that's what drives these kids, the benefit will pay off for them because they will feel welcomed and they will feel loved and they will get a sense of self-worth through this sport. A systematic review of psychological and social benefits of participation in sport for children and adolescents. If you want better cardiovascular health, you participate in physical activity. To keep your blood pressure at a healthy level, you participate in physical activity. And if you want to lose weight, what do? You guessed it, you participate in physical activity. The research that proves physical activity will benefit your health is endless. On the flip side, the research that proving that physical activity benefits your mental health is sparse. Although it has been proven and there are articles on it, doctors seem to stray away from prescribing mental patients with physical activity. Emmy Young, Harvey, Charity, and Payne did a study on the psychological and social health benefits of participation in sport by children and adolescents. Their results being that there are reports that participation in team sports rather than individual activities is associated with better psychological and social health. This is due to the social nature of team sport and that the health benefits are enhanced through positive involvement of peers and adults. This is a prime example of how participation in youth sports will mentally help those individuals. More in-depth research should be conducted to further prove this hypothesis, but the facts are there. It is better for kids to join youth sports in order to help them psychologically and socially. If they start this at a young age, growing up, they will have less mental issues. That includes depression, anxiety, because they will know how to mentally cope with these deals and how to move on. Toward a psychology of positive youth development. There are many youth that are bored and just stagnant. As the years go on, we realize that the self-motivation of children decreases and decreases. They're less interactive with each other because they just stare at screens all day long. They go to school, they come home, they do their homework, maybe hang out with their friends, but a lot of kids are not excited about their future and do not have initiative. Reed Larson, who constructed this study, stated that the initiative is a core requirement for other components of positive development, such as creativity, leadership, altruism, and civic engagement. Children do have a lot of leisure time. They don't pay bills. For the most part, they go to school and come home. School is probably one of their only requirements. So Larson notes that athletes who participate in sports during their leisure time are more likely to see talent as something that results from practice, or more likely to persist in the face of difficulty, and show more skill development over the course of a season. With that being said, children who choose to participate in sports during their leisure time are more likely to have initiative and be self-motivated. These sports give them quality skills that give them initiative and motivation for their future. A systematic review of the impact of physical activity programs on social and emotional well-being and at-risk youth. As said before, physical activity and participation in sports has a positive psychological effect on the youth, but little to none of those articles have considered at-risk children. Lubins, Plotnikov, and Lubins note that at-risk children are children and adolescents who live in a negative environment and or do not possess the skills and values that assist them in becoming responsible members of society. Generally, at-risk kids have depression, social anxiety, and many other psychological problems that may affect their adult life. Allowing these kids to get involved in team sports at a young age may change the path of their life. This could lead them to connections and friendships that they wouldn't have made otherwise. This can also lead them to the skills and the capability to overcome their mental illnesses. Sports psychology interventions with young athletes, the perspective of the sports psychology practitioner. Most athletes go through years of playing their sport in hopes to get to the next level. To get there, they have to work on their technical skills, but they also have to work on their mental skills. One of the main problems that sports psychology practitioners see is that Communicating these ideas and these evaluations to them are often hard because of the level of communication of the youth athlete. Sports psychologists believe that the delivery of the sports psychology service should be organized to meet the needs of the young athletes. Each person is different. Each person has a different interest and different desires and different needs. So sports psychologists believe that it is only beneficial to tailor these services to the young athlete. The authors state that it is clear that providing sports psychology services to talented young athletes makes sense in the eyes of the practitioners, and also that such services must be tailored to this particular clientele group. Research has found that sports psychology practitioners see it fit to counsel young athletes. They even recommend it, as it elevates multiple factors in a young person's mental health. So if we sit back and look at the opinions of the sports psychology practitioner, and these are licensed officials, and their opinion is that they recommend sports psychology, I think that a lot of people in the sport industry should listen up and probably take their help, because it could benefit these young athletes. In conclusion, sports psychology in youth sports is a very beneficial tool, and it is almost necessary for healthy mental progression. Children can boost their self-esteem, learn social skills, have better focus, gain a sense of independence, as well as receive their approval from their elders. Sports psychology allows the youth to have a more enjoyable time during the sport that they play and enables them to learn a sense of consistency so that they stick with their sport longer. Sports psychology can also help the child's parents learn how to interact with their child during sporting events in a positive way. Coaches can also benefit because they can learn more about their athletes and encourage them to be the best they can be while providing a healthy and happy environment for their athletes. Although the research on sports psychology of adults is plentiful, the research on the youth is limited. With this limited research, I still find that the results are significant. I believe sports psychology should be integrated more into the youth team sports as well as any other youth competition.